Cool. No worries. Well, welcome to Too Weird to Live, Too Rare to Die. Today we have Chris Heverin from Spartan Race Australia. Chris, before we jump into the show, what I might do is I might throw it over to Wallo, who is ready with a song that he's prepared to welcome you in and get us started.
Yeah, I hope you were expecting your song because you said you've listened to an episode of this. So at this point, you should get used to our song.
I wasn't sure if that was a one-off or a special.
There's one specially for you and Spartan. I mix that together. So Matthias, can you hit it for me, please? Staring at the mountain top inside my head. Can I? Staring at the mountain top inside my head. Wondering, we can reach the top, we can run that far, we can make it there. We can reach the top, we can run that far, we can make it there. We can be heroes, we can be Spartans, tell everybody we can be heroes, we can be heroes, we can be heroes. Staring at the mountain top inside my head, can I? Staring at the mountain top inside my head, wondering.
You. Very soulful, Wallo. Very soulful.
Yeah, been very soulful of late.
That was like that was a true serenade. There you go, Chris.
I hope you enjoyed it.
Likely
those mountains, the mountains will certainly scare a few people. Let me tell you. So.
Good stuff. So we'll jump into it. Had a few technical difficulties on my end before the show, so keen to dive in though. Chris, tell us a little bit about your background. You've got a long, extensive history in obviously event management and so forth, and professional sport. But where did it all come from? Where did you come from? What was your upbringing like? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, great to have me for being here. Thanks for having me here, Bill.
Great to have me here, you were about to say. Great to have me here, yep.
Great to have me here. I make it feel that
humble start. That's a humble start.
I do the emceeing at Spartan sometimes, and they get the bloopers every time. So I'm the best at it.
We got you on that.
You got me straight away. Look, I'm a Melbourne guy, born and bred, and pretty heavily into sporting family, big Irish Catholic family with 7 kids, and we're all into sport. So I played a little bit of AFL and was involved as I sort of went through that career. I wasn't much good, but tried pretty hard, and anyway, I ended up getting a job at Carlton in the AFL back in the late 80s, so which is a while ago now, and had 5 years at Carlton in the AFL, which was a fantastic experience. Club won a premiership. I did a lot of quite a big variety of tasks and jobs, and had a lot of responsibility, particularly more so in the playing area, but working with the players and that sort of thing. When I started at Carlton, I was a single guy living the dream. And when I finished at Carlton, I was married with 2 kids. So,
bloody Carlton.
Yeah. And back in those days, the AFL was probably not the monolith it is now financially, but it was starting to build. And so I looked beyond to say, okay, what areas can I sort of move into and make some money and have that balance, work-life balance, because it was 7 days a week in the AFL. It was pretty full on. So, and not that was an issue, but there was you're out 2 or 3 nights a week, then on the weekends, and young family, all that sort of stuff that everybody knows about. So I set up my own consulting business and stayed pretty much in professional sport. Was involved in baseball early days when baseball was actually really strong.
Right.
Got heavily involved in. So yeah, baseball was pretty cool. I mean, baseball. We had some big crowds at VFL Park, and
Really?
yeah. I mean,
when are we talking? When are we talking? In what is this in the 80s, 90s, or 2000s?
Early 90s, yeah, early 90s.
Gotcha.
Yeah, so
gotcha.
the Waverley Reds was the club, and they were the sort of powerhouse of the Australian Baseball League back in the day. And I remember getting 20-odd thousand to a game out at Waverley.
That's massive.
And it was a fantastic atmosphere, and I did a lot of work with baseball. In fact, I had a 10-day stint with Baseball Australia in New York with Major League Baseball, and we were well ahead of our time. We were talking about bringing a Major League game out to Australia at that time, and I was part of that team that went over there to pitch that to Major League Baseball. So it was pretty cool. We got hosted by the Mets and the Yankees and that sort of stuff, and fantastic. Back sort of for me starting out, it was great.
Hey Chris, I got a question there. So I for a number of years, up until a few years ago, was competing in weightlifting, just taking it seriously. Wasn't competing at a super high level and what have you, but was training 5 days a week, taking it seriously for a number of years. And I got to know, I guess, the sport of weightlifting and its history in Australia through that. And in the 90s, weightlifting was a nationally televised sport. One of my old coaches, a buddy of mine, Harvey, was sponsored by Telstra. He was on Sale of the Century, which is where all the big celebs were and so forth. And it seems to me, similarly to what you just mentioned about baseball, in the early 90s with weightlifting, it was a massive sport. And what has happened with weightlifting is, from what I can understand, some poor governance. It's kind of now it's the I was at the national championships 5 years ago, and there was 40 people there. So, and I wonder, because baseball obviously at one point in the 90s, like you said, had massive inroads into Australia and seems like good trajectory, but I don't see baseball growing in Australia. So like when you're thinking about sports, national sports, multinational sports, so on and so forth, what are the key things to keep momentum? What are the key things to grow a sport in a nation? I'm interested to hear.
Mate, look, it's a really good question. And you could spend days talking about it, and plenty of people have. My view is that you've got to make the most of the major event opportunities. Now, Sydney Olympics was the most amazing event that I've ever experienced. It was incredible. I was fortunate enough to have some major contracts there. We had the Basketball Australia contract, Athletics Australia. We worked for Visi. We had a whole range of stuff that we did around the Olympics. The sports that were really smart with the Olympics, when the focus was on the sports, grew and were able to take that momentum and go forward. Others sort of sat back, took the money thinking it was just going to happen. And you can go through the list of sports and I think the other thing that happened with the Olympics is that it woke up the professional sports. So the sports with the big money, like the AFL, cricket, NRL, it woke them up in terms of what they needed to do because they saw it on a global scale. So a number of those sports like weightlifting, baseball, softball, that were really high profile leading into the Olympics fell away after the games because they did get swamped a bit, and they really probably didn't have the caliber of people running the sports at the time either.
Interesting. Right. Okay. Cool. So history in working in baseball, and then where are you off to next?
Yeah. Well, I got heavily involved in basketball, so that was pretty cool. Picked up a contract with the North Melbourne Giants back in the day when basketball was really flying, and the Giants won a championship. We were runners up. We had Brett Brown as the head coach, who went on to has just recently been coach of Philly of the 76ers in the NBA. So Brett was the coach here in Melbourne. And, look, it was amazing. We played at the Glass House, about 5,000 seat stadium. It was full most games, and it was great. So I did that for 5 years, as well as other things. I picked up the Stall Gift. I was the event director at Stall, so that was a great time. Stall was great fun. Stall was not great on the liver, let me tell you. Like,
Fair enough.
It was
Fair enough.
it was come in on a Thursday, out on a Tuesday, and there was a lot consumed in between.
Straight into rehab. Straight into rehab after the race.
But again, we did a few radical things with Stall. Stall was on the ABC, and it wasn't getting much coverage, and so found a little loophole in the contract and got it over onto Channel 10, and then we were very lucky that you recall Channel 10 and Channel 9 picked up the AFL rights. So Stall became the Stall on Easter Monday became the 2-hour program that led into the AFL on an Easter Monday afternoon. So the ratings went from virtually nothing up to almost millions.
I can imagine.
And we were able to bring out people like Linford Christie and John Drummond and Obadali Thompson. All these guys are Olympic gold medalists, Olympic medalists, to compete against the Aussie guys. So Stall was fantastic. I love Stall. I still think of it very fondly, and I did that for 7 years as part of our business, and it was great.
Yeah, awesome. And I like the story about trying to think of different ways to boost the ratings and eyeballs on the sport and so forth. It reminds me of weightlifting in Australia. We organised I organised an event with Harvey, my buddy, an event to try something different in the world of weightlifting, because weightlifting's a funny sport. It's golf. It's the loudest, most aggressive, passionate sport, but it's sat in a silent room, followed by golf claps after a successful lift. You know what I mean? It's just it doesn't make sense.
Yeah, I know.
It doesn't make sense. And Harvey, my buddy, who he represented Australia at the Olympics and Commonwealth Games gold medalist and so forth. He came to me and said, "Hey, we want to try and boost the sport. We want to try something different, and we want you to run an event." And we ran an event with live DJs, open bar, vendors all around the Victorian Weightlifting Association, and we would have had 5 to 10x the national championship numbers there, and it was phenomenal. Yeah, it was awesome, and it was different. It was different. It only ran once because, to be perfectly honest, I didn't have a great time working with the VWA there, and it never ran again for. They didn't really like working with me, and I didn't really like working with them. Put it that way. But but it was great. I've not done anything else like that. That's my only example. Because my previous startup played in that space a little bit. But yeah, it's awesome, and I think it's a little bit sad sometimes when you see a sport that, especially with weightlifting, me, because I'm passionate about it. You see a sport with such great potential and what it could have been. If you know what I mean, like it's kind of, it's a little sad, it would be great to see baseball thriving in Australia and basketball has made a comeback, and it's funny how sports, they ebb and flow.
Yeah. Well, I think this is the great thing about the Brisbane Olympics. Brisbane winning the Olympic Games is fabulous, because it means that these sports are going to be brought back up into the spotlight. Prior to the Sydney Olympics, there was 42 test events because there was 42 sports, and those 42 test events were done 12 months prior, within 12 months. So all of the facilities had to be completed, everything had to be in place, and that gave the sports a lot of profile. Broadcasters wanted to cover them, media wanted to cover it. So I think if the sports are clever, and also your point there, Bill, about trying to do things differently, that's definitely where you've got to go. You can't just keep saying that people are just going to come along and do it in a stable little theatre and that's it. I did a lot of work in mountain biking, still do, and that was one of the things that we did. We changed the scope of mountain bike because we said we've got to make this an event, an adventure, a destination. We've got to showcase tourism, and so people come along and have a fabulous time, and mountain biking is part of their experience. It's and that we were able to do that and change the landscape of that sport. And I think it's the same with a sport like weightlifting. You add the fun, the music, the hype. Yeah. You make it an event, and rather than just some athletes participating.
Yeah. Everyone on the call, Wallo and the team at Athyna have heard me talk about. I call it a pattern interrupt in marketing. I heard it first used when there's a company called the Beard Club. And they started as a parody of the Dollar Shave Club. and they had these radical YouTube videos that went viral. They were just like real manly men walking around with beards and no tops on, wrestling bears and riding motorbikes through a ring of fire. You know, that kind of stuff. But I actually did a lot of research and followed their founder quite closely for a while. And he would always mention the term pattern interrupt, and it always stuck with me. Trying to see, okay, cool, if you're going through a social media feed, or you're flicking through a brochure, or you're walking through a bunch of vendors at an event, you need to grab somebody's attention. There's so many people vying for an individual's attention. You need something that's going to stand out. And I always think like that what is a pattern interrupt that we could implement here? You know, how could we be different? So that's interesting.
Yeah, I look like it's absolutely critical, you know, going forward. And, you know, I think that, that's one of the big lessons coming out of COVID. I mean, we can't keep doing things the same way. And we were just chatting about technology, the fact that we've got people from all over the world on this call. And, you know, a few years ago really wasn't a done thing. Now it's just taken a second nature. And so I'm with you totally. In the events world, we have to do that. We've got to disrupt things. We've got to change. We've got to change our thinking. You know, it's there's a lot of merit in it for sure.
100%. So, all right, and then so you're at Spartan Race now. How did that all come about? Were you interested? Did you know Spartan Race and what it was? And it's kind of it's massive, but it's also somewhat niche. You know, was it on your radar? How did it all come about?
Yeah, look, it's a good question. It was not, I was aware of it. It wasn't on my radar in terms of at all, in terms of you know, taking over the license and running it in Australia and New Zealand. But I was in Singapore back in early 2016 on some business up there. As I said, I've got a number of interests, and I got introduced to Joe DeSena, who's the founder and CEO of Spartan. And Joe and I sort of had a couple of chats and a good catch up, and Joe's a pretty much out there sort of a guy, so interesting character. Anyway, after a little bit of time, backwards and forwards, they spoke to me and said, "Look, would you be interested in looking at the Australian business? We want to make some changes." And so then I did a little bit of homework on it, and ultimately we ended up, signing a contract, and I've been doing it for the last 5 years. So. So it's been good. It's a really it's an interesting it's very much a community focused business. Massive engagement with the community. We have a full-time customer service manager, managing on a daily basis, an events business, which is pretty unheard of in the industry. Yeah, but it's cool. It's cool. People love what they do.
Yeah. I feel like Spartan Races. So I know a few people that compete pretty heavily in Spartan Race. I've also been in and out of the CrossFit community a little bit in Australia, so I know that community a little bit, and they're very similar. I feel like they're people that how when people talk about technology and they talk about brands, they talk about Apple is the only technology company that people identify with and say, I'm an Apple person. You don't see someone walking around with a Dell computer and them screaming from the rooftops, I'm a Dell person. Apple's obviously a great example of that. But I feel like CrossFitters, I feel like definitely. And from what I know of Spartan Race, I feel like Spartan Races identify heavily as Spartan Races. You know what I mean? It's in their LinkedIn bio. Put it that way.
I think you're right. Absolutely. Look, it's really interesting. Some of the data, and you always got to be guided, but we know that 89% of people who do one Spartan race do two.
Wow.
So we know we can get them.
That's crazy.
Which is huge.
We
also, as part of Spartan, which is makes it quite unique compared to a lot of other endeavors, is that you actually can start as a rookie, come in, register for a 5K sprint, and a number of a guy who's the current Asia champion for Spartan, Liam McKenzie, did exactly this. Really good track runner. Got some friends talked him into coming along and doing an event, and then he was hauled into the marshal's tent because of his time. I said, "Hang on a minute, mate. Have you cheated? What's going on here?" And but he turns out to be a national level runner. and he just scooted around the course and smashed it. And so he got into Spartan. So this whole community lifestyle, the fact that there's a pathway, that's a really big thing. You can progress as, a couple of years ago, we did some research, and we heard two things come out of the research really strongly into why people don't do Spartan Race. Why would you not do it? We went to gyms and PTs and so on. And they told us that number one is they thought it was too hard. And number two is we had to travel. And so what we did is we just said, okay, if that's the case, we need to bring Spartan to the people. So we created city events, we call them, and although urban events to begin with, we changed the name, and it's now being rolled out globally. But the idea is that we did the MCG, we did Sydney Olympic Park in Sydney, and we did New Zealand with Ellerslie Park in the middle of Auckland, and the whole idea is that come and give it a try, come and do the 5Ks. If you go to the gym 2 or 3 times a week, and you look after yourself a little bit, you don't have to be super fit. You can do the 5K Spartan, no problem. And we found that introduced a lot of new people into the community. And then going back to this pathway thing, people start to come in. Then you see they've registered as an open. 3 races later, they're on the podium at age group 30 to 35. Sit there and go, well, you only had your first race 3 times ago, but they're good athletes and they get into it and they love it.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I feel like there's more similarities again with CrossFit and fringe sports, like even mixed martial arts, like I feel like because when I think of Spartan Race, I think of, wow, it's tough, crazy. I think of I don't know whether it's Tough Mudder or Spartan Race, but I remember hearing about like people getting electrocuted or what. These are the things that come to mind. I don't know whether they're right or wrong, Chris.
Right.
But
absolutely, you're right. Yeah.
Sounded more like Squid Game than
that's a Tough Mudder one.
Spartan Race, so. But yeah, plain Tough Mudder. But it's it's interesting how sports brand themselves, and so I use the example of CrossFit again and mixed martial arts because these two sports were fringe sports. So let's go back 15 years, and the people running CrossFit, in my opinion, have done a very poor job, and the people running MMA or the UFC have done a phenomenal job.
Right.
Both, MMA was blood sport back in the day. Now it's one of the most respected. It's mixed martial arts. It's one of the most respected sports in the world, and is on track to be potentially the biggest sport in the world. Whereas CrossFit had that same thing. It was like train till you die. Rip your hands on the barbells. All this crazy marketing, and they used to have a like I said, I've gone in and out of the CrossFit community. They used to have what is it? They used to have Pukey the Clown was their mascot, and it was a clown on its haunches vomiting from obviously going hard and so forth. And people didn't really. It was too much for a lot of people. It was too much. And anybody that didn't want to do CrossFit, the main reason was because they thought it would be too hard. They didn't think they were fit enough. It was intimidating, loud barbells, aggression, all this stuff. And they've done a poor job of changing that and making it more inclusive, or at least marketing it that way. Whereas mixed martial arts now have academies all around the world for young boys and girls in every major city to train, to be fit, healthy, strong, active, and it's nearly the world's biggest sport. And I think it's a trajectory of two different management styles with two fringe sports, one very poorly in my opinion, and one that most would agree has been exceptional in terms of how they've executed.
Yeah, mate, look, it's really interesting. I think, a word that we always talk about is balance. Mm-hmm. And you've got to have balance in your marketing and your approach to what you do. And we know that you've got it. There's a fanatic element of the Spartan community, which who want everything to be massively tough and hard. So you've got to be able to cater to them with particular events. But there's also a large number of the people who participate in Spartan. They want the courses to be challenging, but they don't necessarily want it to be break their hearts. So you've got to have that sort of balance and how you market it and how you promote it. And at the end of the day, we're running a business. And if we can get that balance right, then you have success. And I think we feel, particularly obviously pre-COVID, we've had 2 years of hardly any events, but prior to that, we'd built up to 12, 13 events a year, which we'd gone from 4 or 5 events a year. We'd more than tripled the size of the business. But I think having that balance and being able to provide that opportunity for different people, so it gets them involved, is really important.
Of course. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I have a question though. Ziggy, that's dogs though. Those dogs.
That'll be Ziggy in the background. I'm just going to mute myself.
So, it brings me, because we've been dancing around this question that's in my head, like from the point where you met the CEO of, Spartan at Singapore, like how did you know that this would probably work in Australia? Because I'm assuming there wasn't anything like that at the time. So like, how did you, what was that gut feeling that, oh, this should work, or I can make this work,
Yeah. The Spartan was in Australia, so it was in Australia. So yeah, it was. It was doing a small number of events, and it had started in Australia, and it had been operating. So what the view was that it wasn't achieving its potential. It had a lot more potential. So one of the first things I did was I organised to bring the Asia Pacific Championships to Australia. And we actually we sold it to Perth. We got Western Australian government backed the event, and we took it to Perth, which gave us plenty of access to Asian races, and that certainly helped put Spartan on the map for sure. And then the second thing we did, which hadn't been at all done, was we created a destination model, and I touched on that a little bit earlier. But we partnered with government, state government, local government, and places like the Sunshine Coast, Port Stephens, Bright in Victoria. There's all over Australia. We partnered with government so that we can, we deliver a destination event, and just people have a much broader experience, and that certainly helped.
Yeah, thank you. Doc, did you have a question? Because I feel like I interrupted you.
No, mate, I've been talking non-stop. No, so Chris, obviously being in an event business like retail and hospitality and so forth, obviously must have been incredibly terrible, particularly being in Asia Pacific, and obviously Australia and New Zealand being very heavy-handed, I guess would be one way you could put it, with lockdowns and so forth. So what did that look like for the business? And I guess what changes have you made? And I think businesses coming through COVID, I feel like a lot of the time are more robust, and would just love to hear how it went for Spartan, and if there was anything that you changed coming out, and how it went through COVID really.
Yeah, well, it really really tough. I mean, it really smashed us. Particularly last year, we looked at it first of all, and it certainly took everybody by surprise, the whole industry. And we went into lockdown. Look, my team have been amazing. They have accepted the situation, been happy, been keen to stay on board. So as we've gone through it, we really haven't lost anybody. We've had a couple of people that have moved on, for their own volition, but we haven't had to actually lay anybody off, which has been fantastic. Amazing. People have been prepared to work on lesser days and so on to get through it. We were able to do one event last year, which was in Queensland, but again the borders were shut, so we had to get an exemption there. So that was okay. That got us trading. We're able to keep, and one of the things, having government partnerships and so on, certainly helped us be able to bring some money forward and things like that, which helped us keep going cash flow wise. This year we were able to do two events in May, the start of the year, one in Port Stephens in New South Wales, then one on the Sunshine Coast, and then we went into lockdown again. So we've had nothing, but we have got our first event back in 3.5 weeks, 4 weeks time in Melbourne. Nice. at Tooradin. So we've got we've got about 3,000 athletes coming to that event. So we're hoping we get a few more. And again, there's quite a few restrictions there, but the key thing is to keep trading, to keep moving forward. So it's tough. We've lost 20 events, which is in excess of $10 million. So we've gone out the door, never to be. It's more than well over $10 million. So that's money we'll never see again. And my attitude to it is, look, people say, how do you make it up? Well, we can't just put on 20 events at the start of 2022 and then do another 20 at the end of 2022 and say, okay, we're back, we've got our money back. That ain't the real world. So what we have to do is work our way back, do what we call the signature races, which are really strong, and we know people will participate in, and focus on that. The other side of it is that what I've done is really diversified the business, and I think we, like a lot of businesses in the events industry, and I know that through the industry body, where like 80% of event operators are currently not back, or they might be starting to come back now. They certainly weren't in October. With the borders opening up and New South Wales, Victoria opening up, people are coming back. However, what you realise is that we had all our eggs in one basket, and a classic business mistake. And no one saw a pandemic coming. So 90% of our revenue, we'd always been sort of like 40, 50%, 60%, because Spartan had grown so much. We'd allowed it to become all consuming. And that turned out to be, in hindsight, it was a big mistake. But also, as you said, Bill, about going forward, it means that we're actually going to be much more robust. So we've actually got some seriously cool stuff happening now to diversify the business. And one of the things that we've got is which you'll laugh at this, but in January I was with my son who's in the army, lives in Wagga Wagga. And we were having a few beers, and on a Saturday night, and he said to me, "I want to show you a movie." And we'd had a few beers, let me tell you, and he puts this movie on, and it's called "That's Not My Dog." And I don't know if you've ever heard of it, but check it out; it's very cool. And "That's Not My Dog" is about produced by Shane Jacobson and Dean Murphy, and it's about joke telling, and they've got all these comedians and musicians there at this party, all telling jokes for 2 hours, and it's fantastic. It's very funny. And I looked at that and I said, I think there's a festival there. So I watched it again the next day sober, and said there actually is a festival here. And as it turned out, a friend of mine, John Foreman, was in the program. He was in the film. I rang John, said I'd like to meet Shane Jacobson and Dean Murphy. So we've set up a business. We're now going to be launching in December. That's Not My Dog, the festival. It's going to be on the Sunshine Coast on the 26th to 28th of August next year. Nice. 3 days of joke telling, storytelling, comedians, musicians. It's going to be amazing. Nice. So that's a pivot, for us into a different space.
Yeah. One of the best events, my favourite event in all of Melbourne, actually, and Melbourne's obviously massive and amazing for events, all the way from, in my opinion, from mid-September to end of April or whatever, 6 months of the year. It's an amazing place to be event-wise. And the comedy festival is my favourite time of the year to be in Melbourne. Yeah. I just think it's such an amazing environment. It's just, I've also been to the Fringe Festival in Edinburgh, and but Melbourne, it's just wholesome fun. It's light, wholesome fun. What I would do is, because the festival in Melbourne, there's normally, your headline acts for $40 or $50 or $60 for a ticket, but there's, up and coming comedians, amateurs and so forth, that you can get a ticket to a show for $10. So we would go watch a show, maybe have a couple of beers, go watch a show, grab some dinner, go watch another show, back to a bar for a couple of years. And it's one of the best nights. So I think you'll be super successful. It sounds like something I'd be right into anyway. It's, I love those, comedy and fringe festival events. I think there should be more of them. They're super successful. So that'll be in Brisbane, did you say?
It's going to be on the Sunshine Coast, so in Caloundra.
Sunshine Coast, gotcha.
And,
gotcha.
But it's really interesting, like you talk to someone like Shane Jacobson, and he's a fantastic guy, and so positive. And it's such a great thing for you when you're dealing, you're going through a pretty tough time business-wise, and to deal with someone who's so upbeat and so positive. In fact, he rang me just before this call, and this podcast, and he, so positive about everything. And, he's saying, come on, Australia, it's time to laugh again. Let's go.
Yeah.
And so that rubs off on you, and that rubs off on my team, and it gets everybody excited. And so that's one of the things we're doing. And the other thing we've branched into is been looking at the industry itself for major events, and some amazing statistics with the major events in Australia. I mean, 12.5 million pre-COVID, 12.5 million Australians every week participated in an event every week all year round. Wow. So when you talk about community sport and going to basketball tournaments, netball tournaments, comedy festivals, food and wine, Spartan, whatever. That's half the population are doing an event every week in this country.
Wow, that's crazy, isn't it?
So what we've done is we've said we want to be heavily involved in that sector, but providing some tech solutions to the sector. So we've got 3 products that we're almost ready to launch. One is a business that will be offering new revenue. We've created a new media channel for the industry, for the major events industry, and that's going to be launched in January. We've got another business that we're doing with a partnership with a travel company. And that's going to be a very, very, very cool travel app and program that's going to be available to all operators around the country. And we've also got, similarly, we're working on a financial services product, the same thing, that's going to be integrated into the whole community, which is going to drive new revenue for the industry. So they're all about driving new revenue. And because one of the biggest issues in our industry is the commercial model has been too heavily reliant on ticketing. You sell tickets, you make a profit. You don't sell tickets, you make a loss. We need to have other revenues come in. So this is something that I've been passionate about. I've been looking at it for 3 or 4 years and put a bit of money into it. And we're at 2022, these projects are going to be rolling out officially. So it's pretty cool time to be part of it. And that's goes back to your point before, Bill, about coming out of COVID and how do you come out? Well, my view is we come out, flying and aggressive and, in a positive way to be able to provide solutions that aren't, the industry hasn't had before.
Yeah, I reckon that's awesome. And it'd be interesting to see what the event space looks like in 5 or 10 years, because everything's getting somewhat blended, blended online, offline, and some, in my opinion, some for the good, some for the, maybe not so good. I think a lot of this event stuff is best, obviously, face-to-face, human interaction. We could probably all agree. But what do you think, your industry events looks like in 5 to 10 years? Is there anything crazy on the horizon, or you think it's just more integration between tech and in person? Or
yeah, I think it's a really good question. I mean, one of the things that we never had prior to COVID is we didn't have an industry body for our industry. So we myself and some other guys from Ironman and lots of other event operators around the country, we formed a body called Australian Mass Participation Sporting Events Alliance, and that's now got 500 members, and it's really active. We're working with the government at the moment. It's still trying to get money for our industry, which we haven't been able to get yet, but they're telling us the right things, that we might get something at the start of the year, which would be nice. Cool. But what has come out of that, and is really clear to me, is that we've always operated in silos. We're competitors. Never shall we talk to each other. We hate each other, blah, 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 and all of that. What's happened is everyone's collaborated. And last year particularly, no one knew what a COVID-safe plan was. How do you do a COVID-safe plan? No idea. Well, we shared all of that, and we had webinars to be able to share that information to the industry. And we've got incredible aggregated data, like the data numbers, just on mass participation, which is running, cycling, obstacle, swimming, mountain biking, and so on, cycling. There's 3.5 million unique Australians. That's a massive cohort of people who do the events every year, from 100%. City to surf to triathlon and whatever. So I think the aggregated stuff is working together is where the industry is going to make a big change. And I think the other part of it is that where there's a big opportunity, and it'll be interesting to see where it goes, is making the events more of an experience. I'm really big in that space as well. I think that's going to be a big shift. That people are going to coming to events want more than just, yes, they want to participate, but they want that greater experience. And I think that's going to be integrated. So, I'm hoping that in 5 years' time, you go to a local fun run, it's much more of a community element there. There's much more going on than just turning up to the start line, running under the archway and do your 10Ks and come back. So they're probably the main things.
Yeah, no, for sure. That makes sense. Like the pre and post event experiences, maybe like the unboxing of the t-shirt and the gear that you run in, and then the experience and the thank you whatever afterwards, and the digital experience. Sounds awesome. I might throw it over to Wallo, Chris. Wallo normally finishes us off with a few rapid fire questions, so to speak, and then we'll get you out of here. Wallo.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, Chris. So, what would you say is your all-time favorite book?
All-time favorite book?
Mm-hmm.
You're testing me now. Let me see. I am an avid reader of Grisham, and I love all the action stuff. Michael Connolly and all of those sort of things. I'd say The Lincoln Lawyer. Let's say that one. I like that series. Well, the other one is Jack Reacher. Jack Reacher is a beauty. That switches me right off the Jack Reacher novels.
So
you're more of a fiction reader, Chris, are you? More of a fiction reader? Yeah.
Yeah, I used to be heavily into
switch off. You say?
I used to be heavily into biographies and stuff like that, but I used to find it was too consuming for work. So I feel that I use reading to totally switch away from the 7 days a week that you're thinking about.
Yeah, I'm a fantasy guy. I do the same thing. Sci-fi and fantasy. Yeah, good stuff.
Yep. My next question is, what is a tool that you can't live without? I don't know if I should give the reference, but there was someone, I think like 3 episodes away, the person said their favorite tool is breakfast. So like you can say anything. You can say anything. Like something you can't really live without.
Something I can't live without. I think at the moment, on the back of COVID, it's certainly Netflix and Stan. I've become a bit of a binger, which is a bit of a worry. So I'd say that.
Welcome to my world. Yeah. Okay. So my final question: do you have any advice to entrepreneurs out there? Any advice at all?
Yeah. Stick at it. I'd say stick at it and find a way. I think from my experience is that starting something from scratch and building it up, and we've done that a lot with events, big events. We did that. The Special Olympics, Asia Pacific Games was an event that was a concept that we had no money, we had no rights, we had nothing, and we turned it into a massive event that was televised live around the world. And I think persevere, find a way. It's not necessarily in the startup world particularly. It's not a straight line. It's not A to B. You've got to work your way through, work your way the angles, work the channels, work out how you can do it, and as much as possible, hang on to equity. I think too many people give up equity too easy. Hang on to equity, keep control as much as you can, and push it through. Don't be afraid to have a go and to get it out there. That would be my big thing.
Yeah, thank you very much. I will take that answer personally because I may have some plans for the future. Maybe I'll throw back to Doc, to finish off.
Well, go for it, Wallo. Go for it, mate. That's what you're going to do. Right? That's my advice. I hate gambling, but I do it every day of my life at work.
Yeah.
I don't bet on anything, but I do in the career.
Yeah,
crazy.
Yeah.
Go for it, mate. Go for it. That's how it'll work out.
Good stuff. So, hey, Chris, look, super appreciative of your time. You're a really experienced guy and awesome insights into, just growing events and thinking innovatively. So, mate, it's been great. And, I really appreciate you coming on the show.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me on, and really enjoyed it. And good luck with your business and with everything that you guys are doing. Fantastic. And, keep in touch. It's great. Loved it.
Cool. Absolutely. Alrighty. Well, from our end, that's a wrap.